Welcome back to Old School Sports and our franchise Hockey Manager 9 playthrough of the Chicago Blackhawks. We are at the beginning of the 2026 offseason. Blackhawks recently completed a disappointing 25-26 season where we were the first team out of the playoffs in the Western Conference. Have made one offer already to Linus Eriksson, a guy who we picked in the draft a couple years ago. Just going to try to bring him over at this point, sign him to an entry-level contract, hopefully see if he can produce for us. Got a couple of big needs for the Blackhawks as this offseason begins. Need to have a starting goalie. We have Jacob Skarek, who's been our backup the last couple years. I think that's a role that he's better suited for at this point. So Mackenzie Blackwood, our longtime starter, is a free agent. There's a couple other interesting free agent starters. They're looking for more money than we'd like to pay, but I don't think we can go into the season with Skarek as our starter, so we're going to have to probably sign a free agent. I did also look at the top goalies just in the league in general, and to pick one up in trade, it's going to be multiple first-round draft picks, and we're still going to be paying them $7.5, $8+ million a year. So even though those guys are a little better than the three who are available through free agency right now, notably our guy Blackwood, or our former guy Blackwood, Luukkonen, and Gustafsson, I think we're probably going to have to go the free agent route with one of those three, simply because it's going to cost us a little less in terms of salary, and it's also going to avoid us giving up multiple first-round draft choices to get a deal done, even though none of these three guys are quite as good as the players that we'd be trying to pick up in trade. The other thing we really want to do this offseason is bring in another big-time winger. We've kind of already started targeting Jason Robertson. Would love to have Connor McDavid. Not realistic in terms of the money he's looking for. But Robertson is a guy who's been pretty productive with the Stars. You look at the last 5 seasons, 41, 26, 37, 37, and 24 goals. Looks like he did have some injury issues this past year. Torn hamstring, out for 2.5 months. But he's only 26 years old. Will be turning 27 in just a couple of weeks. But I think he's the most impactful potential player out there for us. And left wing is definitely a need for us when we look at our roster. We've only got 3 people on the big team right now: Cotter, Formenton, and Holloway. And we could certainly use a frontline left winger, Ross Colton, who had been on our team for the past 3 years as a free agent. Didn't look to bring him back. Feel like at right wing with the likes of Marner, Konechny, and Kunin, we're in really good shape. Center, if Larkin's healthy, with Larkin, Horvat, Sillinger, Hayes, Dickinson, the youngster Villeneuve. Got a lot of talent there. Feel like our defense is pretty solid still, although we have lost some players over the past couple years. But Korchinski had a respectable rookie year, still has upside. And we just signed Sam Rinzel, who we had drafted several years ago, who looks like he could possibly step right in from the Minnesota Golden Gophers right into an NHL lineup and help us. So to me, left wing and goalie are the 2 big needs. Issue is that we've got, a little over $10 million to be able to do it. And we're not going to be able to sign both a Robertson and one of these goalies for less than $10 million. So it may necessitate, if we decide that's the route that we go, trading away somebody else to open up some cap space. But I think as far as an initial plan, we're going to get an offer out there to Robertson and then try to figure out which one of the goalies we should try to chase after. And Robertson, I think, is just a great fit for us. Can play on the left or the right, but primarily a left wing where we've got a bigger need. Very good offensive ratings, really good mental ratings, really good physical ratings. His defensive ratings are not all that great, but he's not there to play defense. He's a guy who's there to put the puck in the net and assist on goals. And as I mentioned, we've Moved on from Colton, who's a free agent. And then we also did trade away longtime right winger Victor Arvidsson, heading into the last year of his contract. Excuse me. Getting a little bit older, and also coming off of a bit of a down year where he had some injuries. Just didn't think that was money well spent. So we definitely have a need on the wing, and we are definitely going to make an offer to Robertson here on day one of free agency. Says he's looking for $6.8 million over 5 years. Certainly don't want to spend quite that much, but would like to just get a deal done without goofing around too much. Wants a no movement clause. We're going to have to kind of agree with what he wants. So 5 years, $6.55 million. We'll try just around $6.5 million. 5 years. See what he thinks about that. Want 6.6. All right, we'll meet the demand. Ask for the response and get an offer out to Robertson here on the first day of free agency. And I'm tempted to try to bring back Blackwood just because he's proven, and he does kind of have the best overall goalie ratings of these 3 free agents. But he is going to turn 30 in December, and he's looking for the most money. So that kind of is pushing me towards Gustafsson or Luukkonen. Gustafsson is the strongest mentally, but he's a guy who was a backup last year, and he's still looking for over $6 million. So I'm kind of pushing towards Luukkonen, or actually, no, I'm not. Luukkonen, well, maybe I am. Just Luukkonen's got kind of the weakest goalie ratings overall, I think, of the crew, but he is actually the strongest mentally. You know, when I put Luukkonen and Gustafsson right up against each other, they're very similar players, as you can see. Both very strong mentally. Actually, they're equal mentally because I'm looking at the exact same player. So that explains why they were equal mentally. All right, here a better comparison of comparing 2 actual players. And you can see Luukkonen overall is a little stronger mentally, but they're both very good. Looking at the goaltending skills, Luukkonen a little better passing, a little better with the blocker, a little better rebounding. But then you start getting into recovery, low shot, skating, and even reflexes, and he's a little worse or a lot worse in some cases with things like skating and recovery. So Gustafsson to me is kind of a more balanced profile, but not necessarily as good. And I do acknowledge that Blackwood, his mental ratings are weaker than both of these guys. His goalie ratings are a little bit stronger. So I'm definitely torn on which way to go. But I think I'm kind of leaning towards Luukkonen. And again, I don't love that low recovery rating and the low shot rating. But he's been a pretty solid goalie for the Sabres. But he's looking for $6.4 million, which is only a tad below what Blackwood is looking for at this point. And we've won a Stanley Cup with Blackwood. We kind of know he can do the job for us. It's just that he's older. How much stock do I put into the fact that Gustafsson lost his job with Minnesota last year? I guess have to look at the team and see who he lost his job to. And it looks like Wallstat. Yeah, they went with Jesper Wallstat. Very well balanced defenseman. He is their future. He's only 23 years old. So I think it's probably looks like they just went with a youth movement, because I think I could certainly make an argument that Gustafson, at least last year and right now, is better than Wallstedt. So that makes me feel a little better that he was really more of a youth movement than them just having someone a lot better than him. Although you look at this and our team thinks a lot more of him than consensus does. Now we've got really good scouting. Very sportsmanlike, stays out of trouble, some issues with adversity. Potential to exceed Blackwood's skill level. That doesn't sound bad. Luukkonen. Potential to exceed Blackwood's skill level. Little overconfident, doesn't make long-term plans. And then, of course, there's good old Mackenzie Blackwood. Do we just bring him back? I mean, we're saying he's a bit ahead of Skarek right now in terms of his value. He's kind of fragile in his legs at this point and his lower body. I think I'm going to go with Gustafson. I don't love the fact that consensus is so much lower than we are, but I do trust our scouts. When I look at his NHL stats, he hasn't had a goals against average below 3.25 for the last 3 seasons. Definitely struggling with what the right decision is here with these goalies, because I like all of them, but I don't love any of them. So given that I don't love the opportunities in free agency, I'm back just looking at some of the highest potential goalies who are signed. And honestly, for the likes of an Ottinger or a Hart, we're giving up 2+ first rounders and still won't get them on board. We can get Shesterkin for 2 first rounders and a player. Issue is he's making almost $9 million and he's only got 1 year left on his contract. So it's kind of a short-term solution to go for it this year. But we're also going to have to move a lot of players to bring him on, which makes me pivoting perhaps towards Jesper Wallstedt, who we were just talking about with the Wild, or Yaroslav Askarov from Nashville. A couple of younger guys who aren't making as much money. Now they're not as good today, but hopefully they could develop relatively quickly and become players that we can build around for the future. But the nice thing with either of them is that we'd have them for a couple of years at a pretty reasonable price, and they'd probably be getting better with our team. Comparing these two guys, certainly Wallstedt stands out. I'd say is better defense, or better mentally overall. Not quite as good with the leadership and professionalism, but on balance, I'd say I prefer that profile a bit. And then looking at the goalie ratings, his positioning is almost off the charts. Not as good with the blocker, a little better with the glove, not as good with rebounding, weaker with recovery, better puck handler, similar on low shots and skating, a little better on reflexes. They're similar players. They're both pretty young. They're making the exact same amount. They're both signed for 2 years. They're both foreign players, pretty good with speaking English, though. I may try to see if we can pull a deal together for one of those guys. And we're going to be giving up multiple firsts for either of them. The price tag for Wallstedt, I think, is a little higher. Multiple firsts with Wallstedt doesn't definitely get it done. With Askarov, multiple firsts, I think, does get it done. And the costs for both of these players are pretty high. If we want to pick up the 23-year-old goaltender Wallstedt, got to give up Lucas Reichel, who's in the last year of his contract, rights to Colton Dock, who we're unlikely to re-sign, I think, given the depth we've got at center, and 2 first rounders, and they'll probably accept that. So that is a higher price for Wallstat than what we're looking to potentially pay. For Askarov. Still have to give up the rights to Doc and 2 first rounders, but we don't have to give up Reichel, and we can get a 4th rounder back in return, and they probably will accept that. So the price for Askarov is a little bit lower, but I don't like him quite as much. And given that we're going to have to give up 2 first rounders anyway, Reichel is not a big part of our future. And a 4th rounder coming back is something, but it's not all that exciting. I think I'm going to go with the player that I like a little better, who's also a little younger. And we're going to make an offer to the Wild. And the potential issue bringing on Wallstat possibly is that it's putting us right into win now mode. Because we're giving up our 1st rounder this year and our 1st rounder next year. I guess we could try to see if we can keep our 1st rounder this year and just give up the next 2. And they would probably accept that also. Maybe we do that because we're not in the playoffs this year, or we were not in the playoffs last season. So we're technically in the lottery, although we're probably going to be picking 15th or 16th. And the hope is that those next 2 first-round picks, particularly bringing on Wallstat, and particularly since if we bring him on, we don't have to gut the team immediately to fit his contract under, since he's making a lot less than the established goalies. I don't think we can get anything else back in return. Yeah, it is what it is. But we're going to make this offer to the Wild. What else would make it work? I guess we could find that out. Willing to consider without adding anything else. Okay, that's good. So we're offering the trade to the Wild, and we've made the big offer to Robertson. We can fit both of those guys on the team without making a lot of other moves. So that's the start of free agency for the Blackhawks. The only other real decision we're thinking about as far as our unsigned prospects is what to do with Victor Eklund, who we picked up in the 1st round, 17th overall last season. Had a monster year in the WHL. I don't think he's got a lot left to prove there. He could play another season there. But other than his mental ratings, he's kind of ready for the NHL. Pretty strong physically, above average offensively. Defensively, not going to bring a ton to the table. You know, the mental ratings, we hope, get better. Question is whether we're just better off having him in our system or letting him spend another year in the juniors. He's a player who could help us if we have some injuries, particularly. But given the fact that we are looking to bring on a left winger in free agency in Robertson, kind of inclined to wait. Although if we've got to sign him by the end of this year, even if we sign him on June 28th, I think he still has a year with us in the books. He just doesn't have a lot to prove there. But is he going to learn more in the WHL or in the ECHL or the AHL? I guess that's my big question. I still got a few weeks before we need to decide, so that's the only thing I'm really thinking about in terms of the youngsters that we haven't signed yet. And Robertson's claiming that he's already got a better offer, so I guess it's positive that we've got a little more money. There were also a bunch of players whose contracts were bought out. I can't imagine there's going to be anyone incredibly exciting that's now on the free agent market because of that. Probably more aging players that aren't all that good. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's anyone who's really jumping off the page, but wonder what Robertson is looking for in terms of compensation at this point. $7.7 million, so he's looking for over $1 million more than we offered last time to him. We do have the opportunity to fit him in. He's definitely fully valued at this kind of level. But we need help on the wing. And if we're able to bring on the young goalie, Wallstedt, who's not making a ton of money the next couple years, we've got the capacity to pay Robertson more. He's still only 26, although he's going to be 27 soon, but we're only having him through his early 30s. We don't have to give up any draft pick compensation, so we're gonna go ahead. I offered you more than what you were looking for. You don't want to be a franchise player, so you want to be a star player? Doesn't seem from the way this negotiation is going that he really wants to sign with us. He's kind of finding any reason to complain about what we're offering him, even though we're offering him more money than he claims he wants. All right, well, he says he's pleased with this as long as he's a star player and not a franchise player. So we'll see what he has to say, but I'm not enthusiastic about this back and forth with Jason Robertson so far. And Jason Robertson is becoming quite a diva. Says that the Leafs are now going to give him close to $9 million a year. So I guess the potential pivot is, do we spend the big money on one of the free agent goalies that we don't love all that much? In terms of Gustafsson, Luukkonen. Is our guy Mackenzie Blackwood already off the market? No, he's still there. Do we spend the money on one of the goalies and then use the draft pick compensation that we were offering for Wallstedt to try to bring in a big-time offensive player? Doesn't look like there's necessarily anyone on the market that thrills us. But it doesn't mean we can't make an offer for somebody else. Or do we just move on to one of the lesser free agents? Barrett Hayton is pretty versatile. Can play anywhere on the front line. Good defensively. Some offensive skills. Great second line player. Not quite a first line forward. But $5 million a year is a lot more palatable at this point than what Robertson's looking for. Rudolph Balcers. Looking for $5.7 million. Adrian Kemp, a little bit older, has been a pretty good scorer in the league, at least a couple of years ago. Kind of on a downswing with the Kings, but the Kings have been a really good team the last few years, so probably wasn't getting as many opportunities with them as he might get with us. $5.7 million. I guess there is an argument to sign two good forwards for the price that we could get Robertson for almost. Kind of build better depth, but not as much star level frontline talent. But I do kind of feel that if we're perfectly healthy, we've got Marner and Larkin, who are both big-time offensive players, as long as Larkin in particular can stay healthy this coming year. Maybe we need a couple more guys who are just good, solid players on the wings to build around with them. And then obviously you can see Villeneuve, we think, has got a ton of potential. Konechny and Kunin kind of fit the profile of maybe the type of guys we're looking to get, bringing a couple more guys like that, and then just kind of really build up so our top three lines are kind of all just very good players, along with a couple superstars in Marner and Larkin. And maybe that's kind of the way to build the team this offseason. Because I like Robertson, but I don't want to be spending $9 million a year on him. I don't think he's the highest paid player on our team. And I do like the versatility of Hayton. His arms are fragile. Hopefully he doesn't get banged up too much. And his elbows and his wrists. I might take a quick look at the trade market and just see if we can piece together a deal for a young superstar winger. And looking at the potential trade market for some of the top young or older left wingers in the game, there's just nothing we can execute on. I looked at guys like Slafkovsky, Perfetti, Mason McTavish, Malcolm Spence, good young players, excellent young players. And even our 3 first-rounders that we still own would not get it done for any of these guys. So I think at this point it makes sense to pivot, to keep the offer live on bringing on Wallstedt as our goalie of the future. And I think since we're not going to be able to get a top winger at really any somewhat reasonable price right now, I think it is time to pivot to maybe second level kind of free agents. And we're going to start off with Barrett Hayton. Like the versatility, like that he's a pretty good defensive player who can score a few goals. I guess the question for me is, how much better is he than Mackenzie Entwistle, who we're moving on from? Because we could always just pick up Entwistle on the open market too for a lot less money. I know our scout is comparing the two of them. I do tend to think that Hayton is better than Entwistle, but might as well just stack them right up against each other and make sure. Offensive ratings, on balance, favor Hayton a little bit. Defensive ratings, pretty close, but on balance, I'd favor Hayton a little bit. Physically, they're close. Probably favor Entwistle a bit. And then mentally, they're pretty close. So Hayton's a little bit better, a little more versatile, almost a year younger, but also looking for more money. Thing is, we could probably bring them both back with the money that we have. So that's an option too, although Entwistle only played 49 games for us last year. He was a guy we were kind of phasing out because we knew we likely weren't going to be bringing him back. I like Hayton better, and we've got money to bring on somebody. Hopefully we don't have to pay him exactly what he's looking for. 3 years, he's looking for about 5.25. If we offer him 4.95 million for 3 years, what does he think of that? All right, 5.05 million a year for 3 years. So we've got the offer back out to him. Got the offer out to Eriksson. Robertson, we're not really live anymore. Let him go to Toronto. There's a lot of competition there. Hayton, it looks like we may end up needing to spend more on also. And let's see when we hear back from the Wild on that proposed trade. So Barrett Hayton says try harder if we want him. The Wild have accepted our offer. And we're going to go ahead and do it. I know trading away 2 first-round picks is a lot. But I'm expecting we're going to be hopefully making a long run in the playoffs the years those picks are up. Does mean that we've really got to get the draft right this year in 2 days, because we're not going to have a first-rounder again until 2029. But I think we're getting our goaltender of the future for a long period of time in Wallstedt. So we're going to go ahead and make that trade. Overall, fans are not happy with us. We raised ticket prices at the end of last episode. And even the acquisition of Wallstedt was a negative, given that we had to trade away 2 first-rounders for him. So hopefully we can be successful on the ice, and hopefully we can keep ownership happy, because the fans are not pleased with us right now. So that'll allow us to move Leenders back to the ECHL. Who knows where he'll end up at the start of the year, but just kind of want to get a look at what the roster should look like. We still need definitely another winger. We've got a lot of money to spend still. Guess the question is, do we all of a sudden jump into the Connor McDavid sweepstakes? I don't think we've got the money to do that, but $13.3 million in 6 years. Are there any offers out there to him at this point? Supposedly Pittsburgh. We've got almost $10 million of space right now, so we'd have to get rid of somebody if we bring them on board. I guess the other option since Hayton's looking for more money already, do we pivot back to Robertson? Like I said, I don't know that I want him to be the highest paid player on our team, but he's a pretty good player. $9.6 million. Oof. I think he's just playing us. Let's re-engage with Barrett Hayton. I don't love the amount of money we're potentially going to pay him, $5.75 million, but it's not a long-term deal. It's only 3 years in his late 20s. And I think the toughness and defensive skills that he brings to the team is something we could use a little more of on the front line. We'll see what happens. And Barrett Hayton still saying he can do better somewhere else. So I'm struggling with where we go. I may try to pivot back to Robertson. It seems like the market for Connor McDavid is not developing incredibly quickly because there's probably not a lot of teams that can afford him. There's an argument to just go right after Connor McDavid, but trying to be somewhat fiscally responsible as I offer way more than Jason Robertson is actually worth to him. Can we get him at $9.45 million a year for 5 years? Doesn't want to be a franchise player. That's kind of a tell. We'll pivot back to Robertson, and we're going to pay him a lot more money than I want to, but we don't have any more draft capital to use on players, and Robertson can just about fit in on our roster with what we'd be paying him. He's younger than McDavid. He's not as good. And he's basically the same age as Hayton, and he's better than Hayton. So we're paying full retail on it, which I never love to do, but he's a really good offensive player. We'll see what happens. And in the meantime, let's take a look at the draft lottery. We're expected to be 15th. Anything better than that is a victory for us. Just don't want to see us in the 16th spot because that means the Devils are going to do really well. So Devils locked in. Odds are we're going to be locked into 15 right here with the last number one or the last first round draft pick we're going to have until 2029. Yep, that's where we're locked in. So doesn't look like any real upsets. The Coyotes, I think, moved up, but San Jose was expected to be number one. We'll be picking 15th tomorrow. And again, that's our last number one pick until 2029, so we better make the most of it. And we're now here with our 15th pick in the draft. Ryan Rubrek went number one to the San Jose Sharks. Looks like a pretty interesting looking forward. Scored 109 points for Oshawa last year. He was projected to be the 4th pick in the draft, but went number one overall. You can see a couple goalies kind of stand out in terms of potential, at least according to our scouts. Suggestions are to maybe go with the left winger Julian Mays, Chris Carpenter, Rasmus Rinne. Couple of centers on the safe suggestion list in Karjalanti and Miksik. Salim Mansour. Risky suggestions are to go with the goaltenders, Sidorov or Zelinka. Probably not going to go goaltender number one with the last number one pick we're going to have for 3 years, particularly after we just traded away 2 of those picks for a 23-year-old goaltender. Obviously, we're going to have to get him signed next year in the final year of his contract, but we've got him locked up for the next 2 seasons at a relatively bargain price. So got to look for somebody who could be a potential front line or blue line help for us rather than a goaltender, I think. And here at pick 15, spent some time going through the players. There's no one that's a can't-miss prospect, which I guess you wouldn't expect to find a can't-miss prospect at 15. I think we're going to go with Julian Mays. It was projected to be pick number 29, so it's a little early for him, but I don't love the fact that he's a little slow to catch on at times. But personality, decent overall. Looks like he's got potential to have pretty good physical and offensive ratings while being a decent defensive player, decent mentally. Only 18 years old, got a lot of room to develop. Certainly not going to be around in the second round. So we're going to go with him. Pick Mays and see who's available for our next draft pick. There are goalies out there now. Oskari Seriverta, sorry. Yeah, he's got a lot of work to do to grow. Maybe look for another forward or a defenseman here. Scout suggesting a couple of different centers. Tomas Vesely, Patrick Trigg, Johan Eklund. Looks like a pretty dynamic offensive player potentially. Not going to bring a lot to the table defensively, and his mental ratings aren't incredible. But certainly looks like he could be a pretty good physical specimen and a pretty dynamic offensive player potentially. Not the best shooting range in the world, at least yet. Projected to be the 79th pick. Ooh, he's fragile in his whole upper body. Victor Arvidsson is his potential, which makes sense given the potential dynamic scoring ability without bringing a lot to the table defensively. And as much as Eklund intrigued me, I think we're going to go with Tomas Vesely, only 17 years old, going to be turning 18 in September. Scouting report pretty favorable, good dealing with adversity, doesn't get complacent, gets along well with everybody. Another guy who has potential to be similar to Arvidsson in terms of his value. He's also sturdy or durable in terms of his injury tendencies. I don't think he's potentially as dynamic offensively, but I think he's a more well-rounded potential prospect. So we're going to go with Vesely here in the second round. Well, we did get Linus Eriksson, who was a guy we drafted a few years ago, signed, but coming out of the draft, a brutal day for us. Connor McDavid ends up going to the Penguins. Jason Robertson signs with the Sabres, and Barrett Hayton signs with the Stars. So all three guys that we were thinking about have gone in other directions. So now we have a lot of money to spend, and not necessarily the three players that we were most interested in to spend it on. Draft review, not surprisingly, we're not one of the best drafts, not one of the worst drafts, kind of in the middle there. But we are in a situation now where we've got a lot of money that we can still spend this offseason. We don't have any draft capital. I guess we could trade away a first-round pick in 2029 now if we had to. And looking at the free agent market, the big names are off the market at this point. So we have not played this offseason well thus far. I mean, we've added a good young goalie for our future, but maybe time to dig into the trade block a little bit. I have a feeling the price on some of these better players is going to be pretty high given the limited draft capital that we have, but if their teams want to get rid of them, maybe we can pick up someone who can help us for a year or two at a more reasonable price. And with the fact that we've really struck out on all of the wings we wanted to bring, I think we are going to sign Victor Eklund now, first-round pick from last year. He could end up becoming an important offensive player for us, I think. So we are going to offer him his entry-level contract and see if we can get him on board, because we may need his offensive help sooner than I would have thought, given that the options in free agency are not top-notch at this point, particularly in terms of their goal-scoring ability. And although we can't find guys who are going to help us right now in free agency, I'm going to make a couple offers. Drew Comessa was with us the last couple years. He's a free agent. We're going to try to bring him back. Don't know that he's ever going to develop into an NHL goalie at the age of 23, but organizational depth who we could have up with us in a pinch. And then also Adam Jecko is a free agent. Looks like he is a guy who has never actually been drafted in the National Hockey League. So I'm not sure if he'll really sign with us or not. But we'll at least see if we can make an offer. Yeah, we can sign him to an entry-level contract. So we'll meet his demand, try to get him on board. And I think we may try to tap the trade market right now because we still need some frontline help for the near future. And maybe there's someone out there. And I think we do have a trade to piece together. Not a revolutionary deal, and it's not a cheap deal, but we're going to pick up Lori Pajanaimi, and I know that that's not the correct Finnish pronunciation, I'm sure. Pretty interesting goal scorer, scored 31 and 28 goals for the Rangers each of the last 2 years. Solid mentally and physically, really good offensively, obviously, does not bring a lot to the table defensively. He's our new Victor Arvidsson, potentially. But he is a guy who can put the puck in the net. Have to give up Ashton Tate, who was our third-round pick a couple years ago. We did just sign him to an entry-level contract. Another right winger who I don't think is as dynamic a potential player as Pajanaimi. Have to give the rights to another right winger. And then we have to trade a fourth, and a seventh for him. So it's not cheap, but we need to improve on the wing. Would prefer it to be a left wing rather than a right wing, but it is what it is. We've got to get talent when we can get it. So we're going to go ahead and offer that trade to the Rangers that we think they'll probably accept. Let us spend a little bit of our money under the salary cap. But with the fact that there's not a ton of big-time players left on the market, the question starts to become, do we sign one of those expensive goaltenders we were looking at before to be the potential backup for Wallstedt and then move on from Skarek, maybe make our goaltending position a little stronger? I don't think that's the route to go. It may just be a situation where we save a lot of money and go into next season and we know that there's going to be some higher priced players who get cut and waived coming out of training camp as teams try to get under the salary cap, and we've kind of positioned ourselves to be one of the biggest players in that kind of the market. That may be what our ultimate solution is. Not a perfect solution, but it may be our best option at this point. And we did get Drew Comesso signed to come back and, be an AHL goalie for us, most likely, some organizational depth. And the Rangers have accepted our offer for Pajanaimi. So we are going to go ahead and complete that trade. I think that does give us a little more offense for this upcoming season. Still going to have to figure out what we're going to do on the left wing. Hopefully we will get our other big prospect, whose name escapes me, Victor Eklund. Hopefully we'll get him signed shortly because he could definitely end up being an important guy for us this upcoming season. And even with Pajanaimi on board, there also is definite potential that Frank Nazar, the number one pick from several years ago, who's now signed, certainly could be contributing at the NHL level this coming year. So I do think between guys like Nazar, Villeneuve, and the potential to bring on Eklund, Rinzel, there's a lot of good young players now who we've been investing in over the past several years who look like they're poised to potentially make a breakthrough. Our salary is in a pretty good situation right now. I know it's a bit of a pivot from what we were trying to do just a matter of days ago in game time, but I don't think it makes sense to chase after, someone in their early to mid 30s, pay them $4 or $5 million a year when it's just going to be taking playing time away from some of our younger players. Obviously, in a perfect world, would have preferred that we ended up bringing somebody on board like a Robertson, or certainly a Connor McDavid, or maybe even a Barrett Hayton. But that's not the way things materialize. So we're going to pivot and do the best we can. And we did get Victor Eklund signed to his entry-level contract. So we're building the team a little differently than I thought we would this offseason. But I think ultimately we're building it in the right direction. We did sign Linus Eriksson also. We may end up loaning him back to his team, but right now we're just going to stash him in the IHL just to see what the 23-man roster potentially looks like. Wallstedt is obviously our future at goaltender, and we've got Skarek signed for 3 years, so feel good there. On the left side defense, Forsling, Hughes, and Korchinski, they're all in the final year of their contract, so we've got some work to do there. Rasmus Anderson, Philip Hronik, Regula, and the rookie Rinzel is right defenseman. So like our blue line, left wing, we're definitely still weak. Cotter, Formenton, and Holloway, and it definitely looks like the first-round pick from last year, Eklund, could step right into a pretty prominent role with us right now. Center, like the depth, obviously Larkin, Horvat, the top 2 lines most likely, Sillinger, Dickinson, and then we've got Hayes, who can play all over, may end up getting more time as a left winger or a right winger next year. And then Villeneuve, another guy, rookie that was drafted a few years ago. Forget what year we picked him up. Yeah, that's right. We picked him up at the end of the second round in 2024 when he just slid like crazy. And that looks like that was a really good pick for us. That was the year after we won the title because it was the 64th pick of the draft, last pick of the second round. So he looks like he could definitely contribute. And then at right wing, obviously that's a strength for us with Marner, Kunin, Konechny, and now Pejanaimi. And then the other guy that we kind of want to have in the mix, obviously one of these players is going to end up getting cut, but Nazar probably doesn't go right to the NHL out of college, but he definitely is a player who's in the mix to be in the NHL at some point next year. So we'll send him back down to the ECHL just to see what a 23-man roster could look like. And the good news is we've got tons of salary cap space. I mean, it's good and it's bad. The bad news is that we obviously missed out on the free agents we were hoping to spend some of that money on. The good news, though, is that, as I said earlier, when we get out of training camp and teams start waiving players, if there's a big-time player making a lot of money that is a little older that a team just couldn't keep under the cap, kind of similar maybe to what happened with Quinn Hughes a few years ago with us, we've got the capacity to bring on a player like that. And with youngsters like Villeneuve, Eklund, Rinzel on the roster, we've got guys that we could send down for some more seasoning, not have to get them to clear waivers. So we do have some options. I think trading away Dickinson is definitely an option. He's in the last year of his contract, one of our weaker centers. It's a position that we're pretty strong at this point. So trading away a guy like him would be in the realm of possibility. But I know it's only July 11th. But I don't feel like we need to chase after any of these free agents at this point. I guess if we could get a guy like Samuel Urson, who's got a little more potential, just add to the goaltending depth. But yeah, $1 million in 2 years, that's not a horrible contract. He's probably better than Comesso if we needed some help right away at the NHL level. So that, I guess, is something to think about. But other than that, I don't know that there's a ton for us to do. And again, I know I'm talking my own book now because we've got the money to spend. But I honestly think at this point, with who's available on the free agent market, the fact that we don't have a lot of trade ammo left after having traded away 2 first-rounders for Wallstedt, that we just wait, see who gets waived coming out of training camp, and also have money to take on players with trade when we get into the season potentially. And in the meantime, we're going to kind of have a youth movement potentially with some of the younger players that are going to be seeing hopefully some significant playing time with us this year. So the offseason hasn't gone as I would have written it up, but I'm not complaining, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't. And we may have a chance to get Urson on a 2-way, which would be great for us. And it looks like he's going to think about a 2-way contract. So would love that optionality to have him on as our top goalie in the AHL and a relatively young guy who has some potential. Feel pretty good about our goaltending situation if we can bring him on board. There's still a few of those younger guys with a little bit of potential out there. But we're kind of done with what we're going to do in free agency at this point. And although we just traded away the rights to Colton Dock, we are going to offer him a 2-way contract. I imagine the Wild will match that. But we're going to go ahead and submit the offer sheet because there's no compensation needed. Really just organizational depth for us, but if we can get him at a 2-way, I feel like it gives us some optionality that may benefit us down the line. And we did end up signing Samuel Urson, so I think that's really good. He'll be kind of the third goalie in our organization in the AHL along with Comesso. And then Carter Klippenstein, a player who's got some potential. Looks like a guy who was never actually drafted in the NHL, so just a random free agent. Our scouts maybe overstating what he can become, but as a 19-year-old prospect, certainly someone we're happy to bring into the system. And we also did get Adam Jecko signed, another player who our scouts think has potential and was just never drafted by the NHL when he was eligible. So get him into the system. The Wild, not surprisingly, are going to match our offer to Colton Dock, but with the young guys that we've brought in recently, including Jecko, feel like we're in a decent shape in terms of some organizational depth and some prospects who maybe will become something for us down the line. So there aren't a ton of big-time players left on the free agent market at this point. A few of the goalies that we talked about, including Blackwood, our former starter, still out there. And then a lot of, mid-30s type defensemen and wingers and centers. Not really the type of player that we're looking to add right now. So I think we've kind of done what we're going to do for this off season. Going to keep checking in, but it certainly doesn't look like a situation similar to the way that it was a year ago, where in September Mitch Marner was still on the market and we were able to get him at a bargain price since nobody picked him up last year at the crazy amount he was originally looking for. Not a scenario that's going to develop this year. So probably not going to be doing too much between now and the beginning of training camp. And we've simmed ahead to August, have 4 new Hall of Famers, Doug Waite, Rod Brindamore, Sergei Gonkar, and Ryan Miller, the goalie. So nice crew going in. will anger some of you who didn't like his chippiness, but one of our votes had gone to Thurin Fleury, and we'll still continue trying to get him into the Hall of Fame one of these years. And as we get closer to training camp, we do have a lot of players in the final year of their contract, many of whom we actually want to lock up. Most notably, Quinn Hughes, making close to $8 million, but certainly one of the premier offensive defensemen in all of hockey. Interesting to see what he's looking for. Looking for a decent raise. So it's obviously a lot of money, but he's in his mid-20s. As we talked about, he's one of the premier offensive defensemen in all of hockey. We'll try to get him for a little less than that. Actually, a lot less than that, a little less than $9 million. It's only a little less when we're talking about $650,000 a year when it's his money and not ours. See what he thinks about $8.95 million a year for 5 years. Ooh, and he's willing to do 8.98, so good that we came in just a little bit lower. We'll ask him for the response, and we'll submit that offer. It would be great to get Hughes locked up for the long term. Gustav Forsling is 30 years old, making close to $4 million. Kind of looks like he's on the downside of his career. Still was an important player for us last year. Check and see what he's looking for, but yeah, close to $5 million. Probably not something we're going to end up paying. Certainly not something that we're going to offer him right now before seeing how the season goes. Would love to bring back Filip Hronek also, making $6.6 million now. He's been a really good player for us since we picked him up. Definitely more of an offensive defenseman. Let's see what he's looking for. Almost $8 million. I don't know that we jump on that right away, given that we've got so many good young defensemen in our system. Luke Kunin is an interesting call. His first season with us, after we signed him as a free agent, was kind of a train wreck. But last year was a lot more productive for us. He's making, I think, just under $6. Yeah, $5.75 million. Wonder what he's looking for to extend. Looking for a raise to almost $7 million a year. Again, not a deal that I'm going to jump on right away. It's possible we end up bringing back a Hronek or a Kunin, or maybe even a Forsling, but not guys that we're going to jump on right now. Cole Sillinger, I would like to get signed. A guy we picked up on the waiver wire last year. Our scouts still think he's got really good potential. Fits in pretty well with the team. Just take a look at team harmony. Doesn't stand out anywhere positively, or positively he does stand out as a leader. So Sillinger, probably the money's going to start getting up there. Over $5 million a year. He's probably worth it, but don't feel like I have to lock him up right now. Dickinson, not going to look to bring back. 31 years old. We could maybe trade him or waive him coming out of camp, depending on how things break. Dylan Holloway has actually been a pretty useful player for us. I like the fact that he can play anywhere on the front line. Another one of these guys that has a role on the team, because he is pretty solid everywhere. Can play a little bit of defense, even though he's a frontline player. Decent offensively. Kind of matters on the money, and $4 million does seem high. So again, not a deal that we need to make right now. Doesn't mean that we won't re-engage with him at some point. And then Korchinski and Hayes, I think both of these guys are probably going to be restricted free agents. I believe they should. Would obviously love to bring them both back. Gavin Hayes, another guy, versatile, can play every position on the front line. $2.28 million for 5 years. We're definitely going to auto qualify him. See if maybe we can get him for 1.95 for those 3 years. He wants more. I can't blame him. 2.15 million for the 3 years. All right, so we got an offer out to Gavin Hayes to bring him back. And last but not least, the young defenseman Kevin Korchinski had a respectable rookie year for us last year as a 21-year-old. Going to be an even more prominent player for us this year. Scouting reports on him are good. Could be better than Rasmus Anderson. A style similar to Quinn Hughes. Stays out of trouble on the ice. Definitely a guy that we'd like to build around. 1.4 for 3 years. Yes, please. So we'll auto qualify him just in case. Always try to save a little bit of money. See if he'll go for 1.35 million a year for 3 years, but won't push things too far if he won't. 1.38, absolutely, we'll meet the demand and submit the offer. So hopefully we get those 3 guys signed over the near term. As I mentioned, there's a lot of guys in the final year of their contract that we could conceivably end up bringing back. But with the money that some of them are looking for, you never know if someone's going to have a big injury or just kind of drop off the face of the earth in terms of their performance. So don't feel like we need to chase after any of those other contracts right now. But would obviously be good to get Hayes signed, Korchinski signed, and Quinn Hughes signed up for next year, and know that we've got those 3 players locked in for the next several seasons. And we have gotten all 3 locked up. Hughes, obviously the most lucrative contract of the 3. Korchinski and Hayes, avoid them becoming unrestricted or restricted free agents. We would have gotten them back no matter what, but good to just know that they're signed. 1 less thing, or actually 3 less things to worry about as we get into the upcoming season. And we're actually going to try to sign another one of our players that we've got rights to. Don't think we need him right away, but Mathis Dubé, who we had picked up in the draft in the 2nd round a little over a year ago, coming off a pretty good year in the juniors, 38 goals, 90 assists. It's conceivable we let him play there for another year, but it's also conceivable that we need him to help us out at some point if we have a lot of injuries, so want him locked up also, hopefully. And we did get Dubé signed. Again, I think it's unlikely that we're going to need him at the NHL level this year. Probably will start him out in the ECHL, but he'll quickly probably be promoted to the AHL, and a player that, depending on what happens with guys like Sillinger, or hopefully we'll get Sillinger locked up eventually, but with Sillinger in the last year of his contract, Dickinson we could be moving on from, Dylan Holloway we could be moving on from. There definitely could be some opportunities on the front line for some of the younger players, perhaps sooner than I would have anticipated if we had been able to sign some big-time free agents this offseason. And we made it to training camp, starting off today, the preseason against Toronto. You can see we've got 35 guys in camp, a lot of decisions that we will need to be making. Hopefully we'll get a good look at a lot of our young talent over the next couple of weeks. As we're getting near the end of training camp, first big injury, Paganini out for 7 weeks with a lacerated spleen. So we haven't announced apparently whether he's going to be on IR, but with a lacerated spleen out for 7 weeks, yes, I think that would be a prudent thing to do. So one of our big additions from the offseason through a trade will be beginning the season on the injury list probably means an opportunity for a young guy, or makes it even easier for us to bring in somebody off of waivers in the next couple of weeks. And despite our increase in ticket prices during the off season, we once again lead the league in season ticket sales, so that's positive. Fans still not happy with us, although they were happy with our first round pick of Julian Mays and then picking up Pajanimi. But the fans are not pleased. But fortunately, our job security is still looking pretty decent right now. Need to finish in the top half of the lead. Got 2 final games here, home against Edmonton and then at Montreal. And then the preseason will be over. We'll need to make some final cuts and see what this roster actually looks like. And it wasn't a great preseason for the Blackhawks. Matteo Rotundi, who had a chance to make the team, cervical hyperextension today in the final game of the preseason, the final loss of the preseason, and we did have a few of them. You can see we beat the Kings, but then lost to Edmonton and Montreal to finish off the preseason. Month of September wasn't much better. We won our first game against Toronto, then crushed on the road at Winnipeg and Detroit, and then a slightly more respectable loss on the road at Winnipeg. So only 2 wins in the preseason for the new look Blackhawks, unfortunately, and the injuries to both Rotundi and, I know I'm pronouncing it wrong, but I want to look at it. I'll figure it out one of these days. Pajanimi. Not perfect, but not crippling either. So we've kind of made the easy cuts. Last cut as far as 7 defensemen we're going to keep on the team comes down to Luke Coughlin, former number 1, our first round draft choice, 16th overall back in our first draft in 2023, or Alec Regula. Given that I'm not expecting the 7th defenseman to get tons of playing time, I think we're going to keep the veteran Regula up, which means that Sam Rinzel is going to make the move right from NCAA Division I hockey to the NHL. Feel that he's just further ahead than Coughlin at this point, so we're going to send Coughlin down to the AHL. Presumably he would be, or Rotundi would be, the first guys that we will bring up in the event of any injuries to our defensemen. And that leaves us with a decision on the front line. Right now, Nazar is also going to follow the pattern of Rinzel and be moving right from NCAA Division I hockey into the NHL. It's possible we move Nazar down if there's someone interesting who comes through waivers, and then clearly once Pajanimi is back, that could mean that we'll send Nazar down to get a little more seasoning in the AHL. But he's going to make the team because we need a right winger. The left wingers, Victor Eklund, who we signed, is going to go right from the WHL into the NHL this year too. We're being a lot more ambitious with some of our young players this year than we have been in the past. And then it's going to be hard for us not to keep up Nathan Villeneuve, who had a brilliant year last year in the OHL. Looks like he's ready to contribute. So Mathis Dubé, who was also in the juniors last year but only 19 years old, ends up being the final cut. We're actually going to send him all the way down to the ECHL. I don't think he's going to be there very long, but want to give him an opportunity to grow as a 19-year-old at an appropriate rate, get an appropriate amount of playing time. So we've got our 23-man roster. You can see we're almost $10 million below the salary cap. Now that'll be a little higher once Pajanimi moves on from the injured list, but we're still going to have tons of opportunity to pick up any interesting players who happen to be available through waivers. And there are definitely some interesting players available on the waiver wire. person from our own system. Hopefully he can make it through. But David Jiricek, interesting, versatile defenseman. Left winger Alexander Kisakov. Right winger Oliver Nadeau. So there are definitely some guys for us to think about. Kind of interesting that a lot of the big money guys not going through waivers this year. It looks like generally younger players, but we'll spend a little time thinking if there's anyone that makes sense. I do kind of not mind having so much youth on the team this year. And I think, when you look at Nazar and you look at Villeneuve and you look at Eklund, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to just play a fourth line pretty regularly with those three guys. Start getting the guys who are in their early 20s a little bit of time playing with one another. Not a traditional fourth line of kind of grinders, but maybe let the young guys get a lot of playing time together. So from that perspective, unless I see someone who can really help us in our goal to make the playoffs on waivers, I may not be as aggressive as I probably thought I would have been a month or two ago. And we're definitely going to put in a claim on David Jiricek. Don't know if it'll go through or not, but would certainly prefer to have him on the team, all else being equal, than Alec Regula. Who does have 2 years left on his contract, but I think we would waive Regula if we're able to bring Jiricek onto the team. So that is one claim that we are going to put in. Just think that he's got a lot of upside. Would love to have him on the roster as a 22-year-old. And there's a lot of young, potentially interesting offensive players. Olivier Nadeau certainly looks like he could be pretty interesting offensively. Scored 30 goals in the AHL last year. Alexander Kisakov, similar, was not as productive last year, but did get more NHL time. And then even going down to Cross Hannes and Sean Farrell. There's some guys that are more offensively oriented who are available, but I don't know that they're upgrades from what we think we have in the likes of Eklund, Villeneuve, Nazar. I mean, I think our guys are probably more versatile players at this point, so I don't want to put in claims for any of them because it would be one of our young guys that we're potentially sending down. I guess the question is whether we would just want to move on from Jason Dickinson, who's in the final year of his contract. But he does bring that defensiveness and that toughness that we sometimes can be a little lacking. So I don't even know if I'd want to get rid of him for one of those guys either. And Jiricek did end up being the only claim we made, and it did go through. And we're actually viewed as a threat for the Stanley Cup this year, which is a little bit surprising. Not surprising that Quinn Hughes is among the list of top defensemen in the league, but the claim of Jiricek, I think, is good for us for the long term. I want to keep Rinzel up, so I'm going to see what we can get for Regula before just sending him through waivers. Probably not too much, but particularly with the draft capital that we've lost, we can get something for him draft-wise. Probably just hit the bid. Looks like it's all older players. Evander Kane, certainly a name that gets my attention. Was down to just 7 points in 48 games last year with the Oilers, though. I'm assuming he was injured also. We've got money to take on a contract. I just don't know that a 35-year-old Evander Kane is a contract that we want to take on. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to sneak Rinzel through to the AHL. I imagine someone would pick him up. But I just look at the productivity of Kane. And I just don't see him being somebody that we need to bring on at this point. So we are going to try to sneak Regula through to the AHL. I guess the easy move would be to just send Rinzel down, but I think Rinzel's ready. Would stink if we lose Regula, but I still think that Jaracek has got a lot more potential, and certainly even today is a pretty similar player. So we'll send him down to the AHL, put him on waivers, and hope that nobody picks him up. So the roster is what the roster is at this point. Still probably will be some players going through waivers the next couple of days, but it is technically opening night. Our first game doesn't take place till the 14th, but the season is ready to go. So we will jump back in our next episode and see what kind of start these Blackhawks can get off to. It was obviously an interesting offseason. Very interesting that we've got a ton of money to spend if we need. When we get closer to the trade deadline, we can definitely probably be one of the few teams in the league that can take on some contracts. So hopefully that will be a benefit for us. And hopefully the Blackhawks can get off to a good start in this upcoming 26-27 offseason. Would love to hear what you think about the moves that we made and didn't make during the offseason down below. And until our next episode, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.